welcome to CrabCon 2024. Today I want to go over a few things I think are very important for you to have as you start your hermit crab journey. Now, if you're like me, you're most likely starting out with a hermit crab that you purchased at a beach shop, a pet store, or even won them at a carnival. Now, a lot of people don't know that hermit crabs can live over 40 years in captivity. Now, this is only if they are properly cared for. Now, these locations where we are purchasing these hermit crabs, they're most likely giving us care guides or instructions on how to set them up. But to be honest, a lot of that information isn't accurate. We want to make sure that we have everything they need so when we bring these guys home, we can set them up properly. So before we go into the details on what they need, today my talk is titled All About the Basics Hermit Crab Care 101. So let's dive in. So as we bring these little guys home, we're most likely bringing them in a critter keeper or even those mesh cages. Now, those are not suitable homes for our hermit crabs. One reason being that they do have modified gills. That just means that they need a certain amount of moisture in order to breathe properly. So we want to make sure that they don't have to struggle. So how do we establish that in our hermit crab's new enclosure? Now, what they're going to need to start with is a glass aquarium tank with a glass lid. Now, we want, like I mentioned, a completely sealed tank so the glass lid will hold all the heat and the humidity our hermit crabs need. Now, how big of a tank you're going to need will all depend on how many hermit crabs you have and how big they are. Now, our recommendations are based off of mold space. So we want to make sure that we have a tank that's big enough for them to safely molt. In order for our hermit crabs to grow, they need to molt. And in order for them to do that safely, they do need to fully submerge under the substrate to shed their exoskeleton. So we know that they're going to live a long time and they're going to grow. So we want to make sure that they have what they need. Now, our recommendations are 10 gallons for every small to medium hermit crab and 15 gallons for every large to jumbo hermit crab. Now, if you just have one hermit crab, the minimum size tank is a 20 gallon. So here you will see this is a regular glass fish tank with a glass hinge lid on the floor. Now, you can find these tanks in different locations, different platforms. It all depends on what you have access to and what you can afford. Now, you can either find them at Petco, PetSmart, Craigslist, or even Facebook Marketplace. I'm sure there are other resources as well. Now, you want to make sure that you are getting a completely sealed tank, so you will need some sort of lid. If your tank does not come with a lid, you can get these hinge lids either at Petco or even on Amazon. There's also an option where you can get plexiglass or even customly cut glass at your local hardware store. If for some reason your tank comes with a mesh lid, you want to make sure you seal that. You can seal it with plastic wrap, press and seal, even cardboard or even styrofoam. The idea is to seal the lid so that all the humidity and the moisture stays inside the tank. So now let's talk about a light source. Now we want to offer our hermit crabs a light source. Now we want to make sure that we're staying away from any heat lamps. Heat lamps may create hot spots on the substrate and could potentially harm our hermit crabs. So we want to make sure that we're sticking to natural lighting. We want to be able to mimic what they get out in the wild. So we're looking for a 12-hour daylight cycle and 12 hours of complete dark. So just white lights. There are different options out there that you can use. For example, depending on what you have access to and what you can get at the moment, you can place your tank in a room in your home where you get a lot of natural lighting. You want to make sure that you are not placing your tank anywhere that it's going to get direct sunlight. We want to avoid the tanks overheating. Now, there is another option where you can place a desk light next to your hermit crab tank, turn it on during the day and turn it off at night. UVB lights can also be used as well, but to get the full function of a UVB light, it does need to be placed inside the tank at the highest point of the tank away from your hermit crabs so they don't burn themselves. If you want to just use it as a light source, you can place it on the top of your glass lid as well. Now, this is my personal favorite. These are Hogger lights, and they have different functions to them. I personally like the daylight cycle setting, which mimics different times of the day. It has sunrise and sunset. After the moonlight setting at night, it will turn off after 2 hours, and it'll stay completely dark until the next day for sunrise. Then there is also another function where it's just a 12-hour light. It's just a timer. It will turn on at the time that you set it to, and it will turn off once it hits the 12-hour mark. Now, we want to make sure that we're just using the white light to avoid any stress on our hermit crabs or even aggression. Now we want to talk about a heat source. Now we want to make sure that we're offering our hermit crabs a radiant heat, and the only way to properly do that is using a UTH heat mat. Now these are under tank heat mats, and they should never be placed at the bottom of our tanks at any time, just because these heat mats do tend to get pretty hot, and it will heat up the substrate and can harm a molting hermit crab. So these heat mats are placed at the back of the tank on the outside back wall, at least 1 inch off the substrate so that it doesn't dry out the substrate. Now these heat mats do need to cover 75% of the back wall so it can create the along with our cocoa fiber. You can use the loose bag of cocoa fiber or even the brick. There are different brands out there of cocoa fiber. You can just use whatever you like as long as it's just cocoa fiber. We don't want to mix any wet substrate together. We can always add moisture if our substrate needs it at the end, but it's really hard to remove the moisture after it's already in our tanks. So this is going to be mixed with 5 parts of play sand to 1 part cocoa fiber. You can use whatever measuring tool you're going to use. If you're going to use cups, you're going to use 5 cups of play sand and 1 cup of cocoa fiber. Now, this does need to be thoroughly mixed, so you don't want any cocoa fiber patches to avoid any blooms down the road. Now, for bigger quantities, you want to mix 1 bag of play sands with half a bag of cocoa fiber or half a brick. So for every 20 gallons of tank, you're going to be mixing 1 bag of play sand to half a bag of loose cocoa fiber or half a brick. Now the bags that I am using as measuring is the 4-ounce bags. So half of the 4-ounce bag is what you're using. Now this is only going to give you at least 6 inches in depth. Of course, if you have larger hermit crabs, you want to at least double that in number. So if you want deeper substrate, you will always add an extra bag or 2. Now, in order to keep track of the heat and the humidity in our enclosures, you want to make sure that you have 2 types of gauges. One gauge being a digital gauge that reads the heat and the humidity, and the thermostat that controls the heat mat and reads the radiant heat inside the tank. Now, this digital gauge does need to be calibrated before placing inside your tank. This gauge does need to be located at the center of your tank, off of the substrate, to get an accurate reading. The thermostat does have a probe with a metal tip at the end. This probe needs to be placed next to your gauge. Now, this will have to be at the center, at least 4 inches off the substrate. If you are having a hard time placing the probe at the center of the tank, you can place it on either of the side back walls away from the heat mats, so your thermostat gets a proper reading. So after you place your probe where it needs to be located, you can press the yellow button to set the temperature to what you desire. For the purple pinchers, you can set it at 81, and for exotic hermit crabs, you can set it to 84 or 85. Once the heat hits that temperature, it will shut off the heat mat. And when it goes under the temperature that you had set it to, it will turn back on. Now let's talk about how to calibrate. So we want to make sure that we're getting an accurate reading once we place this gauge inside the tank. Now, how do we do this? You're going to need a small container, a cap from a water bottle, or even a soda cap. It really doesn't matter what kind of cap. You want to fill this up to the top with table salt. And you're going to add 2 or 3 drops of tap water. You're looking for a slushy consistency. If for some reason you add too much water, you can just tip over the cap to allow any excess water to drip out. Once you do this, you're going to place your gauge and the cap of salt inside the container, and you're going to close it with a tight lid. And you're going to place it somewhere you're not going to disturb it for 24 hours. Do not open it before that time. Now, it usually takes 24 hours to get an accurate calibrated number. So now, after calibrating your gauge, we're actually looking for a 75% humidity. If for some reason it is not reading 75%, which mostly all the time it's not 75, you're going to calculate whether it's lower or higher. You're going to calculate that, add or subtract from whatever it's reading inside your tank. Now, for example, if I calibrated my gauge and I removed it after the 24-hour mark and it was reading 74% humidity, then I know that it's actually off by 1. It's 1 number less than what I was aiming for. So now I know that once I place my gauge inside the tank, I need to add 1 to whatever the tank is reading at that moment. So if my tank is reading, the gauge is reading inside the tank 79, then I know that I need to add 1. So it's actually reading 80% humidity. Now you will need several bowls or dishes. So you will need a fresh water pool and also a salt water pool. Both waters you're going to be using from the tap. We like to suggest tap water just because there are so many beneficial minerals in tap water. But in order to make that water safe, we need to make sure that we use dechlorinating drops to remove any heavy metals, ammonia, and even chlorine. And this will remove any of those things and make the tap water safe for our hermit crabs. Now, the type of salt that you're going to use for your saltwater pool will only be marine grade. You never want to use sea salt or table salt or anything like that. It needs to say marine grade salt with no slime coat. Most of us like to use either Instant Ocean or Reef Crystals. There are other brands as well. Then you're going to need a few dishes for your food and for your staples. Now here are a few examples of pools and food dishes. Now, if depending on the size of your tank is how big of a pool you're going to need inside your tank. Now, if you're going to use Tupperware, you want to make sure that you're doubling them up to avoid any leaks and also disturbing any molting crabs that may tunnel underneath your pools. All you have to do is remove the top container to do your water changes. There's also critter keepers that you can use for bigger tanks as well. It gives them deeper water. We want to make sure that the pools that we're using are deep enough for our hermit crabs to fully submerge. There are 3D options out there as well. With any of our pools, you want to make sure that we're offering either some bubblers to help keep the consistency of our substrate, the consistency that it needs to be. It also helps cycle the pool, so you will do less pool changes as well. Now, if you're going to do bigger pools for a bigger enclosure, then you want to use filters. And you want to make sure that you're treating all your pools accordingly. If you're not going to be adding bubblers to your pools like the picture shows here, these are just aquarium pumps. They have stones at the end. You want to make sure that you are changing out your pools every 48 hours. Prime does need to be added every 48 hours to any pools that are not filtered. Then you have some options here for food dishes. You can so many things out there that you can use for your hermit crabs to feel safe. Now, hermit crabs are nocturnal, so it's normal for them to sleep during the day and come out at night. As they get used to their new environment, they will come out more and explore more during the day as well. Now, as far as food, our hermit crabs need a full balanced nutritional meal daily. Now, a lot of pet store foods like pellets have toxins in them that can make our hermit crabs sick. So we want to make sure that we're staying away from pretty much anything that says hermit crab in a pet store. So we want to offer them a variety of food groups, at least 50% animal protein daily. Now, if you're doing fresh foods, you can do meats, different kinds of meats. You want to make sure that you can offer them raw meats. If you're going to do shellfish, you want to make sure that you're cooking it to avoid any shell rot. Any leafy greens in your vegetables will also need to be cooked, just because dark leafy greens can block the calcium in our hermit crabs. And we know that calcium is very important for our hermit crabs. So we want to make sure that we cook any leafy greens to help minimize that. So vegetables, fruits, we want to make sure we're offering seeds and grains and nuts. Not all seeds, not all nuts are safe for our hermit crabs. We want to make sure that everything we're offering our crabs are unseasoned, no processed or preservatives added. We want to make sure we're looking for single ingredients in everything that we give to our hermit crabs. Now, as far as supplements, which is very important, it's pretty much calcium, which they should have available to them at all times. There are different sources of calcium. For example, you can use eggshells from home. Just crush them up. You can leave it whole. It really doesn't matter. I usually like to put it into a powder form to make it easier for my hermit crab to ingest. You can also use oyster shells in rock form or even powder. I always, like I mentioned, I like the powder just because we know that they can consume it much easier. And right along with cuttlebone. Cuttlebone you can find at your local pet store in the bird aisle. You can also mix all of these things together to actually make a great mix. Now, important items to also keep in your tank right along with staples at all times would be foraged items. Now, our hermit crabs live in trees, so they have access to all types of foraged items. We want to make sure that anything that you're offering your hermit crabs, if you are harvesting them yourself, that they are from a pesticide-free location and no traffic in the area to avoid them being contaminated. We do have approved sellers for food and foraged items that do dehydrated meals to make things easy for our crabs. Most importantly, you want to make sure that these foraged items are treated before placing them inside your tank to avoid any bug infestation. But this is pretty much it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this talk and you found it educational. If you guys have any questions, you know that you can find us on our Facebook group. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of CrabCon. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone has enjoyed CrabCon so far. I think the talks have been amazing. Do you guys have any questions for me, or do you want to talk about something? I saw that Colleen did have a question. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Valerie. So you want to talk a little bit about your substrate, Colleen, that you said you're having issues. You have to just keep in mind that the first 2 inches at least of your substrate, it's normal to be a little dry just because it's exposed to the surface, so it will dry out. But if you were to do a little poke test with your finger throughout the tank, as long as you don't have any crabs down, it's safe to do that and see if the hole holds up. If it doesn't, then you do have crabs down, you can just do a light spray over the surface of your substrate, maybe just once across and per day until you get the consistency you need. You don't want to add too much water, like I mentioned in the video, because you'll have high humidity, and over time, since our enclosures are completely sealed, they will create floods and can even possibly have issues with mold as well. You mentioned terracotta pots. If your crabs are eating them, I sure hope not. It's not a food source. You want to make sure that you're giving them a balanced diet daily, forage items, cuttle bone. They need that to have access to all of that. Let's see, I think the food grade. Food grade, yes. The 3D printed pools are pretty great. Meredith is the one that makes them. I have them in my smaller baby tanks because that's what fits in there, as long as the pools are deep enough for your crabs to fully submerge. So she does have options, different sizes that you can get. They're pretty simple to clean. I use a toothbrush that I just use for those pools to make sure that I scrub everything out. I pick one day of the week and I just change them out, make sure that the hose is not clogged or anything. It might seem gross, but I just blow into them after I rinse them out to make sure that there's no sand or anything stuck inside of them. And the crabs love them. It's just really simple to maintain. I do have filtered pools in my bigger enclosures. Your substrate is always wet around the pool, but the other side, if you have valves on your bubblers, you might want to bring it down as low as it can go. You can add sphagnum moss around the pool, or even live moss, or the fake grass, and put it around the pools just to catch anything that is spraying around there. So you want to make sure that you keep that dry. But it's normal for it to be more moist around the pools. I love filter pools too, just because it gets it's a lot of work to change out pools so often. Oh, thank you, Christine. The sandcastles are in the making. They are pretty cool. I'm actually going to put them in my enclosures as well. The filter pools I use, there's different options out there that you can use as pools. I have the 1 gallon critter keepers. I ordered mine on Amazon. The first set that I did get, I found them at Walmart. They were pretty cheap, and I purchased mini bubbler filters. They're just sponge filters. They're very small. They do come with a plastic casing on top. You just remove that because, you know, with the plastic casing, there's more splashing. So once you remove that little casing, you won't have any splashing. Of course, you still want a valve so that you could control the water pressure. If you're, like I mentioned before, if your substrate is dry on one side, it depends on also how big your pools are. If you have a big tank, you want to make sure that you're having deeper pools just so that you have more moisture being circulated evenly throughout the tank. Now, if you have a really big enclosure and you have small pools, you want to distribute the pools one on one side, on one end of the tank, and then one on the other side. There's nothing that says they have to be together. You just do what works for you. Sometimes working with members that have issues like that on Lycos, I would suggest them to put one pool on one side and the other on the other side so that the moisture is evenly distributed. Well, with the filtered pools, it's less maintenance, yes. So you don't need to change them as often as you would with bubblers because the water is being filtered 24 hours. I just simply prime every 2-3 days. It depends on if the crabs are molting, there's no one up, I would just change them out completely. But it all depends on what you have, how much space you have. I just changed mine out once every 3 weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, depending on how dirty they are. You want to make sure that you're just priming at first, and then that's pretty much it. They take care of themselves. And with the filters that I have, you don't need to, the mini sponge filters, you don't need to change them out so often. You just need to change them out once a year. And when you're rinsing out, you don't rinse out your filters just because you don't want to get rid of all the beneficial bacteria in them. So just take a paper towel and just clean off the sponge filter and then just put it back in. I don't know what I would do without the filters. They just make things so much easier. Holly, if you have crabs down, you can take the first inch. You would have to work very slowly. Of course, could take off the surface, just the top layer of your substrate, and just dry it, or just throw plain sand, completely dry sand over the top of the substrate. You can do up to 1 inch per day if you have crabs down, just to hold in that humidity. Then when your guys come up, you could just easily dry it in the oven, bake it till it's dry. The name of my shop is Land Hermit Crab Educational Center. I'm not on Etsy. It's just the website. If you have me on TikTok, I have my, maybe I can link it. Let's see. Let's see. Maybe Beth, if you can do it for me, it's not even letting me. But you can find me on Google, just Land Hermit Crab Educational Center. It is a blog, but you can just click on shop, and that's where I have all my items. I also have it up on the CrabCon group, so you could just go there and search my name. My TikTok, my name is the same, Land Hermit Crab Educational Center, on all the platforms. You can just find me there. I just pretty much teach basic care. I do get a lot of DMs with new people that need help setting up things or having issues with their crabs. But I am a moderator on Lyco, so you can always find me there as well. Anyone else have any other questions? Can we see the crab behind you? Yes. This is my captive bred baby tank. Let's see if I can give you a good view. So this is the base, the pools, their shell shop. They do need a little cleaning, and their wheel. And this is their topper. My captive bred babies are pretty big now. They're about in 1.5 inch opening, one of them at least 1.25. So a lot of them do come out during the day, but today seems to be a quiet day for them. Prime, it's really hard to overdose prime. I mean, it happens. Sometimes you'll add 1 or 2, 3 drops extra. What you can do is, with your prime bottle, when you first get it, just poke a little hole on the top like this, so that you can, all you have to do is, it won't let out too much at the same time. Thank you. Yes, Colleen, you can find me on Lycos. You can do a little poke test and do a little video if you don't have crabs. If you do have crabs down, you can do the poke test, but do not go any further than 1 inch down. Just make sure. Thank you, Valerie. That is the link to my shop. Actually, that's Big Cartel. It's the other one. Okay, that's good. So you're going for prime, you're only going to use 1 drop of prime for anything less than a gallon of water, and 2 drops per gallon. For a small pool, it doesn't matter. Anything less than a gallon, you can add just 1 drop. Oh, Suzanne, you sent it. I didn't see it. It does last forever. I actually finished my first big bottle, the little bottle like this. It was one size a little bigger since I've been crabbing. So I would say 5 years, that little bottle lasted me. It only wasted just because I have so many tanks, but this is what I have now. And they're very inexpensive. You can find them on Amazon. It's cheaper than purchasing them at the store. Well, the recommendations for adding prime has changed. What you do need to keep in mind that these instructions are based off of people that keep fishes, aquatic animals. So our crabs don't, yes, that's the one, Valerie, thank you. Our hermit crabs do not live in water. They're not marine crabs. So they're not in the water all the time. So they're not constantly in there. So I would just prime. The new recommendations is prime once a week, but you can do every 2 days. It just do what you think is best for you. I prime every 2 days, every 3 days, and change my pools out once a week if they're just bubblers. With filtered pools, you will either change them every 2 weeks to 4 weeks. It all depends on how dirty they are. You want to make sure that you're priming accordingly, follow the instructions from the bottle. Oh my goodness, you bought huge bags. When I first started out, I actually purchased a huge gallon bag of Instant Ocean as well. I did put it inside of a big bin. As long as you have it completely sealed, it'll last forever. You can use live sand in your pools if you have deep pools. I wouldn't suggest it for smaller pools, but you can do it from a gallon pool. If you have really big enclosures, you can do the live sand and live rock. I actually have live rock in two of my pools. My exotic tanks with the strawberries, they do love it, and the Ecuadorians, they love to swim in there for a while. Sometimes I get worried, especially with the black strawberries, but they know what they're doing. As long as they have great access in and out of the pools, I wouldn't worry about it. But live rock, live sands, just want to make sure that there is no additives to this live sand. So make sure that you look in the back of the bag and the ingredients are. I do too. I actually have these little droppers that I use for my oils and for and I just label them. I use it for my oils, which is convenient because I buy the big bottles, but I don't want to keep taking the bottles out. But with a prime, I just put some in here and it's so much easier. You can find these at the Dollar Tree. If you don't find these at the Dollar Tree, they have also bottles like this that you can just remove, and it's still like a dropper. Good. It's good to keep it. Even if you don't have it in a container, you can just close the bag really tight and maybe put a little clip or something in there just to keep the air out. Because if it does get exposed to air, it will turn like rock, and then you're just going to have to chisel at it. Yes. These are great. They're pretty great. The dollar store has great things that you can use as well, little bottles like that. And prime does smell pretty bad. You just want to make sure that when you're going to use it, just shake it up a little bit before you use it. Any other questions? It does. It smells like sulfur. It's horrible. I actually, this bottle here must have had a little hole. I had to tape it, and it was just seeping out. So every time I walked by my dining room, I smelled it, and my husband was like, "What is that poo smell?" And I said, "Oh, the prime must be leaking." Well, Colleen, when most of us started, we didn't know much of anything. the majority of us didn't know anything when we started out, and we started out with those sponges in the pool. But it's all about researching and educating ourselves so we can better do things for them. He should be fine. I wouldn't worry. Um, Even if your crabs, if you are there, if they're toe dippers, we want to make sure that we're giving them that option. So if they do want to fully submerge, they can. A lot of hermit crabs, especially purple pinchers, are toe dippers, but during just before the molt cycle, they do like to take deep swims. So we want to make sure that we're offering that regardless. When I first started crabbing, my two original crabs I thought had passed. Hermie was my first. I think that's a common name with hermit crabs, but Hermie was down molting actually 13 months. So he was down 13 months and then he came up, and I was like, who is this? It was crazy because I have my captive bred babies in that tank, and they're so much smaller than he is. He's actually a 2¼ inch opening shell now, and I don't know how old he is, but it was 5 years ago. Yeah. My other crabs, I think the longest they've gone molting, maybe one or two of them, 9 months, but a typical molt for my guys are usually 2 months. The smaller crabs will only molt about 4 weeks or so. So there is a gauge where you can test your salt. You can find it on Amazon, and you will just add a drop of your salt. You want to make sure that you're following the mixing instructions on the Instant Ocean. So it's 1/2 cup of Instant Ocean for 1 gallon pool. So I usually prep my gallons. I have 2 salt gallons ready, just because I do have a lot of pools. So it makes it easier. So you just mix it accordingly to the instructions. It usually is perfect, but you want to, if you want to test it, if you have deeper pools, sometimes all you need to add is just regular tap water to it. You want to balance out the salinity, but you can just find one of those gadgets. I barely use it, just because I really mostly use it for my exotic crabs. Yes, that's another thing, Suzanne. When they come up from molting, even if you have toe dippers, they love to go into fully submerge into the pools. They want to clean off themselves. Yes, so it's half a cup of Instant Ocean per gallon of water. With the new prime recommendations, you can prime in your jug and it'll be good to go. I don't usually do that. I skip that step and I just prime when I add my water to the pools. So the salinity, let me tell you right now, so I don't know it off of the top of my head. I'll find it for you. Let's see. Can't find it for you now, but I will enter it into the chat once I do. Any other questions? Oh, we have a new kitten in the family, so that's him trying to get my attention. Thank you. Yes, hi, Jinx. Any other questions? Let's see. I have a big guy that's down since November. But for small, sometimes we really don't know how when was their last molt, so I really wouldn't worry. November was he was a big guy, so the bigger guys usually tend to molt longer than the others. I always like to suggest offering safe oils to the crabs, just so that the molting process is much easier and faster for them. It's they get to shed their exoskeleton much faster. So offer very small portions of either coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil. Organic is always the best. Salmon oil. There's so many options out there. Yes, it's good for them and they love it. I actually have Mary Akers oil dishes in my tanks. Yes, avocado oil. I have grapeseed as well. Let's see what else. There's so many. Beef tallow. Beef tallow is my crab's absolute favorite. You want to make sure, like I said, you get something that is organic so that they're pesticide free. If you don't have an oil dish, you can use something small and a small dish and put just a little bit here, or even put it on top of their food in their food dish. You only want to add a few drops just because we don't want these oils to get into their gills. You're very welcome. Okay, guys, I think that's it. No more questions. You can always find me on Lycos. I am a moderator. You want to ask me any questions there, you can make a post and tag me. I'll be happy to help. Always. Thank you. You guys are amazing as well. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.